What if I told you that a tiny, sun-drenched corner of a backyard could produce enough food to feed a family for an entire year? While most people think you need a massive farm to achieve food independence, Grandma proved that's just not true. I've spent months breaking down her unique high-density system to see how she turned a small patch of dirt into a literal grocery store. Today, I'm boiling it down to the 4 essential secrets that make this tiny space strategy so effective, so you can start growing your own year of food regardless of your yard size. The magic dirt secret. If you saw a tiny backyard garden that produced enough food to keep a pantry bursting all year long, you would probably think there was some kind of magic involved. Most people look at the seeds or the gadgets, but the real secret is actually under the fingernails. You don't grow plants. You grow dirt. The plants just happen to live there. Most people treat dirt like the brown stuff that ruins a carpet, but in a small space, that soil has to be high-performance fuel. If the soil is weak, the plants look skinny and sad. If the soil is powerful, you can pack plants in much tighter than the back of the seed packet says, because there is a buffet of nutrients right under their roots. A great way to build this is a specific mix that does not require heavy bags of chemicals from a store. The ideal blend is 1/3 homemade compost, 1/3 peat moss or coconut coir to keep it fluffy, and 1/3 coarse sand so the roots can breathe. A handful of wood ash from a fireplace acts like a multivitamin, keeping the soil from getting too acidic. This mixture should feel like chocolate cake crumbs. If you squeeze it in your hand, it should stay in a ball for a second, and then fall apart the moment you poke it. If it stays in a hard lump like clay, the roots are going to suffocate. It is hard to wrap your head around how much life is happening under your feet. A single teaspoon of healthy organic soil contains between 100 million and 1 billion bacteria. There are miles of microscopic fungal threads acting like a tiny internet, sending messages and nutrients between the plants. Using harsh chemical fertilizers is basically like nuking that tiny city. Keeping that underground city thriving allows the microbes to feed the plants for free. One great trick is burying kitchen scraps like vegetable peelings directly into the garden beds. Earthworms will flock to the scraps, eat them, and leave behind waste that is arguably the most powerful fertilizer on Earth. By letting the worms do the heavy lifting, the soil stays perfect for high-density planting, without ever needing to be dug up or tilled. Finally, there is the smell test. If a garden smells like a swamp, it is being drowned. If it smells like nothing, it is dead. But if it smells like a fresh forest after a spring rain, you have hit the jackpot. Growing up, not out. When floor space is limited, the only way to go is up. It is the same logic city planners use for skyscrapers. Instead of letting a vine crawl across the grass where it takes up 10 square feet, you can train it to climb a wall. Vertical gardening can increase a harvest by up to 300% compared to traditional row planting in the same amount of ground. You can use almost anything to create these climbing structures, from old bed frames to simple twine draped over a fence. The goal is to make sure the plant spends its energy growing fruit instead of fighting for a spot on the ground. Heavy crops like squash or melons usually snap their vines if they hang in the air, but there is a clever fix for that. You can create little slings out of old t-shirts or mesh bags to cradle the fruit as it grows. This supports the weight so the vine stays intact. It is also important to guide the plants every few days. Vines are a bit like teenagers. If you don't give them some direction, they will end up somewhere they aren't supposed to be. Gently tucking the new growth into the trellis keeps the garden looking organized and prevents a tangled mess that blocks out the sun. AR flow is a massive benefit of this method that most people overlook. When plants are crowded on the ground, moisture gets trapped, which leads to mold and fungus. By lifting everything into the air, the breeze can dry out the leaves, and the sun can reach every single fruit. This means fewer diseases and a much higher quality of food. It also makes harvesting a lot easier on the back. Instead of crawling around on hands and knees looking for a hidden cucumber, you can just stand up and pick it at eye level. This strategy turns a tiny balcony or a small strip of dirt into a high-output food factory that produces more per square inch than any flat farm ever could. The cut and come again greens. Most people think of harvesting as a one-time event where you pull the plant out of the ground and dinner is served. However, certain vegetables are like a gift that keeps on giving. Loose leaf lettuce and Swiss chard are perfect examples. Instead of waiting for a full head of lettuce to form, you can simply snip the outer leaves. The center of the plant stays alive, and it keeps producing new growth. You could theoretically eat off the same 5 or 6 plants for an entire season if you treat them right. It is more like giving the plant a haircut than performing surgery. One of the best tricks for success is knowing where to put these greens. Spinach and lettuce tend to get grumpy when it gets too hot. They start to taste bitter and eventually bolt, which means they grow a tall stalk and stop producing edible leaves. A smart move is to plant these smaller greens in the shade of taller plants like tomatoes. The big leaves act as a natural umbrella, keeping the greens cool and extending the harvest time by several weeks. This layering technique is how you get 2 different crops out of the exact same square foot of soil. Nutrient density is where these leafy crops really shine. A single cup of kale provides over 100% of the daily requirement for vitamin C. By planting a new row of seeds every 2 weeks, you create a perpetual harvest. This means you never have a week where you are out of salad. While your neighbors are buying wilted greens at the store that were shipped from 1,000 miles away, you are stepping outside and clipping something that was still growing 5 minutes ago. This constant cycle of growth is what makes a tiny space capable of feeding a person for an entire year. If you keep the roots in the ground and just take what you need, the garden stays productive for months longer than a traditional patch. High-calorie heavy hitters. To actually survive on a garden, you need more than just salad, you need calories. This is where the heavy hitters come in. Potatoes are the kings of the small space garden, and potatoes are especially productive in tight footprints. You can grow 50 pounds of potatoes in a space no bigger than a hula hoop by using a vertical tower. As the green leaves grow upward, you keep adding soil or straw around the stem. The plant responds by growing even more potatoes all the way up the tower. By the time you reach the top, you have a massive stack of food that only took up a tiny circle of ground. Sweet potatoes are another secret weapon because they are incredibly efficient. Not only do the tubers under the ground provide a massive amount of energy, the leaves are also edible and delicious when sautéed. It is one of the few plants where you can eat both the top and the bottom throughout the season. Potatoes are so calorie-dense that they are one of the few foods a human could theoretically live on alone for months at a time. They are essentially ground bread that stores its own energy until you are ready to dig it up. Storing these crops is just as important as growing them. You do not need a fancy underground cellar to keep potatoes fresh for months. The key is curing them, which means letting them sit in a cool, dark place for a few days so their skins toughen up. Once they are cured, they can sit in a simple crate under a porch or in a dark closet. Keeping the sun away is vital, because if potatoes get sunburned, they turn green and become bitter. If you manage your space correctly, a few vertical towers can provide enough starch to last all through the winter months. It is the ultimate insurance against rising grocery prices. Small space, big protein. If you want to stop relying on the grocery store, you have to figure out where your protein is coming from. Beans are the answer. Specifically, pole beans are the ultimate choice for small gardens because they climb incredibly high while only taking up a few inches of dirt at the base. Varieties like Kentucky Wonder can reach 10 feet tall in a single summer. These plants are also nitrogen fixers, which means they actually pull nutrients out of the air and put those nutrients back into the soil. They are essentially a fertilizer factory that pays you in food. There is a big difference between eating fresh green beans and growing beans for storage. To get through a whole year, you want to let some of the pods stay on the vine until they get crispy and dry. Once the pods are brown and the beans inside rattle like little stones, you can harvest them and keep them in glass jars. These dried beans will stay good for years and provide the protein needed for hearty winter soups. It is a simple way to bank calories for a rainy day without needing a freezer or expensive canning equipment. Even the way you pick them matters. If you keep picking the young pods, the plant thinks it has not finished its job yet, so it keeps producing more flowers and more beans. If you leave them too long, the plant stops. The best strategy is to eat the young, tender ones early in the season and then let the last batch dry out for winter storage. Whether it is snow peas where you eat the whole pod or shelling peas where you just take the seeds, every bit of the plant is designed to be as efficient as possible. This balance of fresh eating and long-term storage is the key to true food independence. It turns a summer hobby into a year-round pantry. The kitchen pharmacy. A garden should do more than just fill your stomach, it should also keep you healthy. Growing your own pharmacy starts with crops like garlic. Garlic is fascinating because it follows a biological clock. You plant the cloves in the fall, they sleep under the snow, and they wake up the moment the ground thaws in the spring. It is one of the easiest crops to grow because it basically takes care of itself. Beyond the flavor, it is packed with compounds that have been used for centuries to support the immune system. Using herbs as bodyguards is a clever way to save space and protect your food. Marigolds and basil are not just for show or seasoning. Their strong scents act as a no-vacancy sign for pests. If you plant them right next to your tomatoes or peppers, they confuse the bugs that are looking for a snack. This is called companion planting, and it allows you to grow more food in less space because the plants are actually helping each other survive. You do not need to spray poisons when the plants are doing the defending for you. For those with almost no outdoor space, ginger is a surprising winner. You can grow spicy ginger roots in a simple bucket on a sunny windowsill. It is a slow grower, but it is incredibly rewarding. Then there are the survivor crops like turnips. Archaeologists have found turnip seeds from hundreds of years ago that could still grow. They are tough, they grow fast, and you can eat both the root and the leafy greens. Keeping a few pots of mint or chamomile around also ensures you have fresh tea, though mint is a bit of a bully and will take over the whole garden if you do not keep it in its own container. Water secrets for lazy gardeners. The biggest mistake people make in a small garden is how they water. Many people just spray the whole thing with a hose. Watering the leaves is actually a bad idea. It encourages disease, and most of the water evaporates before the plant can even use it. The goal is to get the water to the toes of the plant. A deep soak once or twice a week is much better than a light sprinkle every day. Deep watering encourages the roots to grow far down into the earth, which makes the plant much tougher during a heat wave. Using a blanket for your soil is the best way to save work. This means a layer of mulch, like straw or even grass clippings, spread over the dirt. It keeps the sun from stealing the moisture, and it prevents weeds from popping up. There is also an ancient method that uses unglazed clay pots buried in the ground. You fill the pot with water, and because the clay is porous, it slowly leaks moisture directly to the roots over several days. It is a perfect system for someone who forgets to water or wants to take a weekend off. You also do not need to pay for water if you are clever about it. A typical roof can collect hundreds of gallons of water from just 1 inch of rain. A simple barrel under a downspout can provide all the water a tiny garden needs for the entire summer. To know if you need to water, use the finger test. Stick your finger into the dirt up to the second knuckle. If it feels like a wrung-out sponge, the plants are happy. If it is bone dry, they are thirsty. By mastering these simple water habits, you ensure that every drop goes toward growing food instead of being wasted, making the most of every gallon.